You've never quite fit the version of sensitive that people romanticize. You feel things deeply, sometimes unbearably deeply, but you don't fall apart in public. You don't cry easily. You don't overshare. You watch. You absorb. You understand people with a precision that sometimes frightens even you. And beneath all that understanding, there is something else, something quieter, something that has learned, very carefully, how to use what it knows. You've never called yourself dangerous, but you've wondered, and that wondering, that specific private 3 a.m. kind of wondering, is exactly why you're here. Most people think empathy is soft. They picture someone who tears up at commercials. Someone who takes on everyone's pain and can't set a boundary to save their life. Someone endlessly open, endlessly giving, endlessly overwhelmed by the world's feeling. That is one kind of empath, but there is another kind. Someone who feels just as deeply, maybe more, but who learned, somewhere along the way, that feelings are also information. That understanding people is also power. That warmth can be given and warmth can be withheld. And both of those things can be done with full awareness of the effect they will have. That is the dark empath. And the reason this is so hard to talk about, the reason most people who are dark empaths spend years in confusion about themselves, is because this isn't a villain's story. It's a survivor's story. It's the story of someone who was sensitive in a world that punished sensitivity and quietly, brilliantly, painfully adapted. Stay with me, because before this is over, something is going to shift in how you see yourself. Not everything will feel comfortable, but it will feel true. You feel everything, but almost no one knows it. Not because you're numb, because you are the opposite of numb. You feel so much, so intensely, that early on you made a decision, maybe consciously, maybe not, to stop letting it show, because showing it had consequences. Someone laughed. Someone left. Someone took your softness and treated it carelessly, like it was nothing, like you were nothing. So you built a face, calm, measured, slightly unreadable, and behind that face, a whole world no one gets to see unless you decide they're safe enough. People think you're strong. They admire your composure. What they don't realize is that composure isn't peace. It's a wall. And walls don't get built without a reason. You can read people almost instantly, and sometimes that scares you. You walk into a room and within a few minutes you have a map. You know who needs validation, who is performing confidence they don't feel, who is one small slight away from shutting down, who is lonely beneath the laughter. You see the micro expressions, the hesitations, the things people say, and the louder things they don't. You didn't ask for this ability. And here is the part no one talks about. Sometimes you look at someone you genuinely love, someone you would never want to hurt, and a thought moves through you like a cold current. I know exactly where the soft spots are. That thought frightens you. Good. That means your conscience is intact. You are deeply, fiercely, almost obsessively selective about who gets the real you. Most people receive a version of you. Warm, present, attentive, but edited, controlled. The full, unguarded, genuinely uncertain version of you is something you protect like a secret. Not many people have ever seen it. And the ones who have either earned it over years of careful trust building, or they stumbled into it by accident, and you've spent time since wondering if that was a mistake. This is not coldness. This is what happens when someone young and open and genuine is met with carelessness. When the people who were supposed to be safe were not safe. When you learned that showing too much of yourself gave others too much to work with. You didn't become guarded because you're broken. You became guarded because you were paying attention. You have a fierce, burning sense of justice, right up until someone wrongs you personally. For others, you advocate without hesitation. You see unfairness and it genuinely disturbs you, like a frequency you can't unhear. You will fight for someone who can't fight for themselves. But when it's you who has been wronged, something shifts. The empathy doesn't disappear. You still understand why they did it. You can trace the wound behind the wound, the fear behind the cruelty, the insecurity behind the betrayal. You understand all of it, and then you file it away. Quietly, deliberately, and you begin to recalibrate. You don't scream, you don't beg, you don't send 3 paragraphs at midnight, you simply decide. And that decision is cold in a way that surprises even you sometimes. People underestimate you because you're calm. That is a mistake they usually only make once, and now the one that will sit with you longest. You have used your understanding of someone to influence them, deliberately, and you knew exactly what you were doing. Maybe it was subtle, a strategic silence when someone needed reassurance, a well-placed compliment before asking for something, a withdrawal of warmth, not explosive, not dramatic, just a quiet cooling that made the other person lean forward, reach for you, try harder. Maybe it was larger than that. Maybe you kept someone close not because you were fully committed, but because their devotion felt like safety. Maybe you said just enough to maintain the connection without ever actually offering yourself. You weren't malicious. You told yourself it was self-protection, strategy, survival. But in the silence after, in the space where guilt almost formed but didn't quite, there was something else, a recognition, an awareness that sat uncomfortably in your chest. You don't need to punish yourself for this, but you do need to look at it. Because that awareness, that discomfort, that is the exact place where a dark empath either becomes something beautiful or something they'll regret. You know almost everything about the people close to you. They know very little about you, and somehow no one has noticed the imbalance, because you are such a good listener, because you ask the right questions, because being around you feels safe, genuinely safe, and people open like they haven't opened with anyone else. They tell you things, private things, tender things, and you receive it all. Carefully, with real care, but you give back only what you choose. Controlled portions, selected truths. You remain in some fundamental way a mystery, even to the people who believe they know you completely. This creates a loneliness that is almost impossible to explain, because you are surrounded by connection, you are loved, you are trusted, and yet no one truly sees you, and part of you arranged it that way, and another part of you aches because of it. Both things are true at the same time, and you carry both, mostly alone. You are exhausted by people, and you cannot survive without them. Solitude doesn't just feel good, it feels necessary. Like oxygen, you need it to decompress, to recalibrate, to remember who you are when you're not performing or managing or holding space for someone else's chaos. But total isolation hollows you out faster than anything, because you are wired for depth. You need complexity. You need the stimulation of other minds, other pains, other worlds colliding with yours. You come alive in genuine, real, layered human connection. The problem is that most interactions don't reach that level, and shallow connection doesn't feed you, it drains you. So you end up caught between too much and not enough, never quite landing in the place where you feel fully at rest. This is not a personality flaw. This is a nervous system shaped by experience. One that learned to be both hyper-aware and deeply hungry for the kind of connection most people can't offer. There are moments when someone's trust in you, their love, their attachment, their quiet dependence, has felt like a weight instead of a gift. Someone has looked at you with reverence, with the specific kind of softness that means you are safe to me, you are everything to me, and instead of warmth, you felt the full uncomfortable mass of what that meant, the responsibility, the power. And somewhere beneath that, a question you didn't ask out loud. What happens when they find out who I actually am? That fear of being truly known and found lacking is one of the quietest, most painful signatures of the dark empath. Not arrogance, not indifference, but a deep, bone-level uncertainty about whether the real you, the unedited, uncontrolled, genuinely uncertain you, is someone worth loving. You've never quite believed it, not fully. And so you've kept enough of yourself hidden that you never had to find out. People either idealize you or they find you unsettling. There is rarely an in-between. They're drawn to your depth but unnerved by your distance. They love your calm but sense the wall inside it. They feel seen by you and simultaneously feel like they will never fully see you. And so they either decide you are extraordinary or they decide you are dangerous, and neither of them is completely wrong. You've wanted to explain yourself so many times. You've started the sentence internally, tried to find the words for what it feels like to be this, and stopped, because the words feel inadequate, or because you weren't sure they'd land, or because something in you decided again that being misunderstood was simply the cost of staying safe. There is a grief in that. Not dramatic grief, the quiet kind. The kind that lives in ordinary moments. When someone laughs at something and you smile, but you're watching the whole scene from slightly outside of it. When someone says, I feel like I really know you, and something in your chest says nothing because you know they don't, and you don't know how to close the distance. That grief is real. You're allowed to feel it. You are still reading this. You haven't looked away. And somewhere in you, a voice has been saying, quietly, persistently, this is me, not the monster version, not the manipulator without conscience. But this, the complexity, the contradiction, the person who feels too much and shows too little, who cares deeply and protects fiercely, who has done things they're not proud of, and who still asks, still wonders, still audits themselves in the dark. Am I a good person? That question, that specific, exhausting, relentless question, you've never fully answered it, not cleanly, because every time you reach for an answer, the evidence is mixed. You are generous, and you are guarded, you are loving, and you are strategic. You have held people with real tenderness, and you have also calculated the cost of that tenderness before offering it. You are not simple, and simple answers were never going to fit you anyway. Here is what I need you to understand, and I need you to stay with this, because this is the part that changes things. Everything you are, the reading of people, the walls, the warmth held carefully, the strategic distance, the capacity to feel deeply while showing almost nothing. None of that appeared in you by accident. It appeared because it had to. Because somewhere early, maybe in a home that wasn't entirely safe, maybe with a parent whose love was unpredictable, maybe in a childhood where you had to understand the emotional weather of the adults around you just to navigate the day, you learned that being sensitive was not enough, that feeling things deeply was not enough, that you also had to be smart about it, strategic, prepared. You learned that reading people wasn't just interesting. It was protection. It was how you stayed ahead of pain. It was how you knew when to go quiet, when to perform, when to disappear before the storm hit. And the part of you that learned to use your empathy, to manage, to influence, to protect yourself through understanding others, that wasn't cruelty being born. That was a child finding the only tool available in a room that didn't have many tools. The real work is not about destroying that part of you. You don't need to burn down the walls. You don't need to become someone who is open and unguarded and endlessly vulnerable. That is not healing. That is just trading one survival strategy for another. The real work is choosing, consciously, deliberately. Choosing when your walls are protecting you and when they are imprisoning you. Choosing when your reading of people is keeping you safe and when it's keeping you from genuine intimacy. Choosing when your strategic self is a valid tool and when it's being used to avoid the terror of being truly known. Because you can be known, not by everyone. You were right about that. Not everyone deserves the full you, but by someone. By the right people in the right conditions when you decide, not out of accident or desperation, but out of genuine trust, to let them in. And you can survive that. You can be seen, really seen, soft parts and all, and not be destroyed by it. That is the fear underneath all of this, isn't it? Not that you're a bad person, but that if someone saw you completely, they would find something worth leaving. Healing for a dark empath doesn't look like softening. It looks like integration. It looks like taking the fierce intelligence you've always applied to everyone else and finally, turning it toward yourself with compassion instead of judgment. It looks like letting someone see you afraid, letting someone see you uncertain, letting someone love the part of you that isn't performing. Not because vulnerability is always safe, but because you have survived so much already. And some part of you, beneath the walls, beneath the calm, beneath the watchfulness, is still there, still soft, still hoping. That part was never lost. It was just waiting for you to decide that you were worth the risk.